Blessed love and peace. Here we take two. Action. Here we are, face to face, a couple of silver spoons, hoping to find a two of a kind, making it go, making it grow. Together, we're gonna find our way. Do. Together, taking the time each day, hoping to find the things you just can't buy. A couple of silver spoons together, you and I together, taking the time each day. Yo, songs all outside the key of life. Songs inside life, outside of the key. Whatever it is. That song, wow. 40 years ago. 40 years ago. That's how long. 40 years ago. 80s. Starring a young child actor who goes on to have a rather proficient adult acting career, mainstream media, network television. Ricky Schroeder is his name. What them call him? Pretty Ricky, what they call him. Haha, how about that? And also featuring young Carlton, aka Alfonso Ribeiro, who is actually much cooler in that program, TV show, Silver Spoons, than in the follow-up. It seems like such a long time, a long gap between those two shows, because I grew up watching Lightweight, Silver Spoons. I was about the same age, maybe a little bit younger, in the 80s, about 84, with the hitting 84. Mainstream TV, Silver Spoons, probably came on like at Saturday night, whatever. And again, just the premise, just now that I think about it, again, first of all, anytime having children actors, trouble, right there. So anything. I mean, it's difficult for me to think of anything, to be honest, at this point in life, in like films and media, anything that has a child actor, that's just like a healthy thing. It's not. It is not. And it's difficult because we got this nostalgia going on. But it's beneficial to recognize, even with this nostalgia, that no, anything featuring a child actor, bad news. Bad news. Now that's in and of itself. But then considering, and that's specifically talking about the experience of the child actor, the actor self, the exposure to like the Hollywood scene, the temptations, the influences, the corruption, and otherwise, that's that. And then the normalization of that corruption. Again, the whole premise. Again, I'm just thinking about it. This is in the almost literally in the bones. Like I just thought about this as I was getting ready to join. So I sing this song. I listened to the lyrics. I'm like, okay, lyrics are generally positive. It's not too much of a romantic thing or too explicitly or subliminally. It's still a friendship thing. But then, so that's why I sing it. And then afterwards, just now, I'm thinking, wait, hold up. The whole premise of that story is the whole premise of the television show is about it's so pedophile now that I think about it. It's about a tycoon, a rich man who acts like a boy, he's like in his 40s. He's a toy inventor. He invents toys and he makes a lot of money. He lives in a house that's just filled with toys and a train and everything. He's a kid. He's a boy, but he's rich. Has money, and he adopts this boy, Ricky Schroeder. I'm uncertain what happened. Maybe Ricky Schroeder was an orphan, something happened or whatever, but he adopts his boy. So now it's this rich mogul boy man living as a father to this young boy. Now in the 80s, pedophilia wasn't so like in the forefront of people's minds, to think about that as a thing. But at the same time, it's planting that seed of like, yo, wait, hold up, wait, a dude by himself with a boy living together, and the dude is acting like a boy. You have things like the film Big with Tom Hanks that basically makes his career, and if that wasn't suspect enough, a man playing the role of a boy, and just going through that whole confusion kind of thing between what's the difference between a boy and a man, boy and a man, boy and a man. And then all of it's endearing. All of it is charismatic and whatever else. If that wasn't suspect enough, what actually launches Tom Hanks's career is Bosom Buddies, where he and his friend dress as women in order to get an apartment. And that's the whole film. That's the whole TV show. They're dressed in drag, pretending to be women, in order to live in this women's only apartment building in New York or whatever. That was his first TV show of big note that I'm aware of, like in the late 70s, early 80s. And then he got a film break. Again, Big, I think, was his first film break when he plays a boy. So anyways, again, these things are just like, it sows the seeds of the corruption and suspect things being normalized. There's another example I was thinking about a second ago. Oh, at that same time, there's another TV show. This is all not what we started this joint for, but we're doing it. Another TV show. Again, it's like, this is like an endearing thing because I grew up with watching this thing, and it's normal. It's like everybody watches this during that time, and it's Different Strokes. And right there, what? And again, it's just like the subliminality, and like people say, oh, you're reading too much into it. No, you're not reading enough. You're not opening your eyes enough. Serious. And it's already too obvious at this point. Now it's just a matter of, it's not even a matter of damage control. It's just a matter of like, I guess, like waiting for the wave to kind of like crescendo or whatever, and then like cleaning up the debris afterwards, because like kinfolk already know this, and it's like it's even like, I won't say too late to do anything about it, but it's like many kinfolk are too long gone to actually, like, the law and the lawmakers and the authorities, the official authorities are like too gone to be able to do anything sufficiently about it. Like, it's the system is too big to control to do anything like healthy properly. It's basically kind of like what is it, mitigating the damage, like just trying to like minimize how much damage is being caused, until it just like the machine goes off the rails. That's where things are. So anyways, my point, Different Strokes, that was a TV show about another rich man living in an apartment building in Manhattan, whatever, New York, the land of the Mohawk, and adopts two brothers who are of African ancestry. Again, a single man living with two boys. There was perhaps a further cleaner version, but it felt awkward. It just felt so awkward. Even though it's probably healthier, it just felt further awkward, which was Webster. So anyways, and again, in each of these cases, look at the situation of the child actors. Anyway, that's the thing about it. One thing I remember, I watched Different Strokes for years. The reruns for years. And I also remember there being a specific episode about pedophilia, where there was this guy, a photographer or whatever, who lured the younger Gary Coleman's actor Arnold, and his friend's name escapes me at the moment, um, but lured them into his apartment, promises of candy or whatever else. And so then like started taking photographs of them and then said, Leia, take your shirt off. And so I remember specifically the episode began with a warning saying this is something to watch with parents or whatever else. This is a very sensitive thing. So it was like, whoa, this is serious. And it was very uncomfortable. And Arnold didn't feel comfortable doing it, so he left. But his friend stayed there and whatever else. And so eventually, like Arnold told his adopted father, and they went into the apartment and like they found him before anything actually happened or whatever. But I mean, it was all kind of cringe and everything else like that, and that's part of the point. But at the same time, the whole TV show itself was about a man living with two boys. And obviously, I mean, single parents adopting children, there's children who are experiencing a lot of difficulties and they need help. And I guess what helped in that particular storyline was that I think the mother of the two boys passed away, and she was the former housekeeper of the man. So it's not like they were just strangers or whatever. But anyway, still, it's just like that premise. And part of it is supposed to be like race relations, and that particularly with different strokes, and like just this introduction of like a multiracial kind of experience where people can have like normalized relationships with each other, even though being from different backgrounds. So I think that was part of like the intentionality, at least um, in terms of like the network and societal intentionality. However, again, like Webster was along those same lines. It was a Greek family, a husband and wife who adopted a boy who was of African ancestry. Emmanuel Lewis, I think his name is. Um, and I think one of the actors, the actor who played the father, was a former NFL player, which was like how he had his notoriety, whatever. But I think actually that was probably a healthier version because it was a married couple, and so then it's like not as like suspect. But at the same time, it was just awkward. I mean, the relationship it was friendly and everything, but it was just like it didn't have the same kind of like chemistry or charisma or just like the comfortability. It was just maybe, and that's the writing or whatever else. But anyways, all of that from a theme song, television theme song. So, anyways, there's that. Now, what we got to say for today? Hooray, hooray, and all thanks and praise. Um, Shabbat recently concludes. It is comparatively early in the evening. It gets darker now. The wind is just starting to get a little bit coolie. It's starting to get a little bit coolie. Leaves are still green, popping green, like it's summer. But the air just in the past day or two starts like, oh no, we getting there. So a few weeks into the autumn equinox. So that's that. Able to do some of the first this week, 4 days this week, I think. 4 days, 5 days. Wow. Able to do spiritual discipline, at least the AM part of it. Today, able to do most of the readings. Hallelujah, Baruch Hashem, Alhamdulillah, Shishimado Om. So, we feeling that at the moment. Rice is cooking, obviously. Um, it's a little bit early, but still preferable to be early with the banter, the boisterous banter rather than later. Anyways, still being mindful of conditions. All right, I guess we're gonna get into all this. Oh, okay, we'll see. Um, all right. So do the prayers meditations. We're appreciative of this. Um, it's been, to be honest, it's probably been a few months since I do the readings in the proficient way. So um, it's a matter of getting acclimated back into this, and so again, we give thanks for doing that. Also, in doing it, it's interesting to observe the effect of the back. Indeed, indeed. Now we're reminded of some recent suggestions and otherwise, but the back is an interesting phenomenon. Um, Stress, the just life stress that a person experiences tends to manifest itself, particularly in the back. It can manifest itself in a lot of different ways, in the organs, in the joints, in the mind, in terms of like headaches, migraines, and stuff like that. But the back is particularly one place. So even though we may be doing things that are healthy with our back, um, just experiencing stress, literally carrying a emotive load or whatever in life, a heavy spiritual load, emotional load, a relationship mode, a work, I said a mode, load, abstract. So, like if you think about carrying a heavy load on the back, that's easy to just think about like the back being strained about it. But when we carry like emotional loads, when we carry spiritual loads, when we carry like just life loads that weighs literally in the back, the stress. And there are particular points in the back where stress has a tendency of accumulating. I experienced that considerably through the years, particularly in certain episodes in my life. Now, anyways, all that being said, point is that at the moment, what's interesting is there's an awareness of some certain things that precipitate this. Obviously, not getting exercise, being latent, sitting like this, actually, to be honest, leaning forward and not having proper posture, that does things to the back. Being sedentary, not walking. Abdominal exercise is very helpful for the back, so that it's not the back that's carrying the weight of the upper body by itself. The stomach muscles, when they're stronger, carry further amount of that weight, and it takes pressure and that load off the back in the physical sense and in the physiology. Um, Food, that factors into it. Salt, as the brethren we articulate before, communicates. Also, how we sleep, our posture, and additionally, um, what I experience is that sleeping on the back, what they call it, is not mummy style, but like coffin style or whatever, but just sitting flat on the back, firm support for the back is proficient in posture and all that. So, anyways, my point here is that today when I'm doing the readings, sitting on a hard surface, like sitting on the ground, whether it's the concrete or whether it's a hardwood floor, that can be rather tenuous. That can be rather tedious for the back. And sitting on the hard floor for hours, sitting on the hard floor for hours when one is 50 years old, haha, over 50. I'm over 50, plus a few days. Anyways, that's particularly stressful for the back, and I experienced that today. Now, in addition to that, sitting on the hardwood floor for hours, over 50, and then reading scriptures. That's heavy, because just being aware of like the energy within reading scriptures. It's heavy. Like, can I say literally? Like, yeah, kind of, sort of. Is gravity heavy? That because it's like that. But there's a huge weight. There's a stress. I mean, if you just think, if you read something like you read like legalese, if you read a legal contract, like you start falling asleep. It's boring. But it's not just boring. It's heavy. It's dense. It's not just a matter of words that are or whatever, but it's like the subject matter and like all the energy that precipitates that. It's heavy. The scriptures are similarly like that. So um, that is uh, that is part of the experience when reading scriptures. There's a heaviness, and it's actually probably something that's one of the things that's off-putting for many people because it is heavy. It does have the energy. It's not just a matter of like things being preachy and like doctrinal and dogmatic or whatever. Like y'all got to do this, y'all got to do that. But it's like just the words itself are heavy, and it's like there's I mean you can say it's a burden, but I mean it's a weight. We'll just call it a weight. And so we feel it. So literally, when reading the scriptures and sitting on the hardwood floor for hours, that I can feel the stress like tensing up in my back at that moment, during that moment. Now, at the same time, very often I tend to be like in a zone, particularly when doing it for hours. Kind of get into a zone of kind of like being off the earth and not feeling the pain. Sometimes my legs can get like, yo, if you want to walk again, you're gonna want to stretch soon. So it gets like that, and when the legs are getting stressed like that, that also shows like, yo, putting the body through some things and be mindful of that. And particularly because again, the way the weight is distributed, the physical weight is distributed on the body. A lot of it when sitting down on the ground, cross-legged, and my posture, I still have to work on that. To be honest, after all these years, still very modest, and much of that is because when I begin my path, I weighed over. During the early years of me beginning my path, I weighed like I put up to over 400 pounds. So me just sitting down, any kind of like cross-leg style was just a thing. So when I was in that process of learning those basics, didn't kind of master sitting in a healthy style per se. So that continues on. And again, the chair that I'm sitting in right now is not the best. The back is out actually. So anyways, I'm getting to a point right now, which is actually very appropriate to what's going on right now. So all these things, I can feel it. I can feel my back feeling stressed, and I can feel that the stress of all those factors that I just mentioned, like manifesting. I can feel it happening as I'm doing it, and it is what it is. One additional factor that goes into it is when cats start popping off when I'm doing this. And there is a very I mean there's a very um, evidenceable telepathic cipher experience where kinfolk respond to what I'm doing, um, without there being a direct how do I put this, with very minimal direct type of how do I put this, without us here doing very much. um, there's a responsiveness around us that kinfolk communicate in terms of there being a dissettling experience, and a solicitation of discontinuing whatever it is that we're doing, whether we're playing the drum, now that's further obvious, whether it's reading scriptures, whether that's doing prayer, whether it's oftentimes just doing this, being up at night or whatever. Now it's still a little bit early, but there are things that people communicate, ways that people communicate, of letting it be known, like, yo, we'd like you to stop doing this at this moment. Particularly prayer and meditation. Um, Chainsaws start going off, buzzes, this, that, and the other, right when starting to do prayers and meditation. And we can call it coincidence, this, that, and the other, but it's just through the years, it becomes a rather noticeable thing, even to the point of like actually the distinction between specific scriptures, because we read from numerous different scriptures from numerous different traditions, so that when we read from certain scriptures, quiet. Then when we start to read from another scripture, boom, noise. And it's loud. It's like right outside the window. And it's again, it's saws, it's banging, it's all different types of stuff. And some point it could be, some point we recognize it as like people responding and doing what people do, intentionally, like responding to what we're doing. But then in other ways, we also recognize it as like otherworldly, and there being just that experience of like, okay, you want to be holy, you want to be spiritual, this is the realm. So it's not a matter of getting mad or antagonistic. Um, Yet that being said, it is stressful. And when I'm doing already what I'm doing, and this is no sympathy, this is no weepy. This is just a matter of like observing conditions and looking at cause and effect, and understand, observe what's going on, and discern like how to proceed in an optimal way. Um, so amidst all those other stress things, when reading the scriptures, particularly after doing it for today, the session was probably, I don't even count, because don't look at the clock, don't use electricity during Shabbat. So it was probably over 4 hours. I began probably a little bit after midday and continued all the way through dusk after sunset. So that was probably, like I said, probably over 4 hours, and didn't finish actually, to be honest. Um, but didn't light a candle, so just called it a day for what it is. So 4 or 5 hours just straight reading aloud. Um, and it's also, to be just for the record, it's also in other languages. We read in the original language. Some of it is transliteration because that's my linguistic proficiency. I can read in most of the languages that the texts are written in. However, my reading skills in Arabic, in Sanskrit, and additionally are very modest, and it would take a long time for me to read the words from the Sanskrit and the Arabic directly. So in these cases, I read from the transliteration, whilst I work to improve my language skills. Latin is from the Latin. Hebrew I can read proficiently, effectively. Um, anyway, so those are the main language. Oh, Chinese, yeah, that's another one I have to work on significantly. So I'm reading from the Pinyin primarily, although technically today from the Zongyong, I read sporadically from the text that I can read, the actual Chinese that I can read, because didn't have the Pinyin available today. Ay, mira. Ha ha ha. Oh yeah, that back thing, that back thing. That's a nice subliminal right there. We got some plantation going on precedingly, and can't blame it on nothing but ourselves. But we do recognize a relationship. And what am I speaking of? We're going to keep it like that for the moment. So anyways, the back stress, causal factors, solution, consideration, pending, in the process. In the meanwhile, those are the notes, and we share for whatever benefit it provides to the kinfolk who are in similar conditions, situations, and studies. So that's today. Insight from today. Religious path, spiritual path, religiosity. Yes. Okay. Um, this is actually rather beneficial. Oh wait, I was supposed to say, wait, am I corny? I didn't even say that after singing the theme song. And then I'm supposed to say, you betcha. And then I'm supposed to say, don't get it twisted. Come kiss me now. Something along those lines. And then avail myself towards being called psychotic. Oh, here it is. Again. As it is yesterday. On the way to the store. That's it's an unnecessary anecdote at this moment. So insight from today. De La Soul. Peace and blessings. Anyways, insight from today. Here we go. So when kinfolk look at me, if they look at me, if they care to look at me, whatever, and say like, oh, if they have criticisms about the path and whatever, what does he claim to be? I think people are off that at this point. Many people are off that at this point. But through the years, what is he? Is he Muslim? Is he Jewish? Is he Christian? Is he Hindu? Or whatever else? And then trying to discern in like finite allegiances and dogmas and everything accordingly based upon those boxes. And when people ask me, do my best to answer honestly. People often are looking for the quick answer, like the predetermined boxes answer. And if I say yes, ask me if I'm Muslim, I say yes. Okay. Then next week you see me at the shul davening with a talit. You say, hold up, you said you're a Muslim. Yeah. But no, you're doing Jewish now. I'm like, yeah. Are you Jewish? Yeah. Nah, you can't. Who said? Are you Christian? I follow Jesus. He's a teacher. No, but that's not. I mean, you're asking me if am I bowing down to you at that point, and that's what the concerns are. So my point is this: I answer questions as honestly as I can, and I have to answer it in a way knowing what I believe. And then I'll also knowing when I know the people are trying to ask without, how do I put this? Knowing that what the people are trying to ask, and knowing I disagree with what the people are trying to ask, but without getting into that immediate disagreement, because this is oftentimes through the years, people on the streets and not trying to have like a long time kind of conversation. This is like, yo, we rolling up. Are you down or not? And we're not trying to hear that yin yang da 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 da. Well, that's what I am. So you're gonna qualify how I respond. But again, so anyways, point is. Actually, this is side notes. People are looking for preset answers. And because of the rigidity in the questions and the expectations, when receiving answers, have the tendency, the susceptibility of making conclusions that are inaccurate. And much of it is based upon people's own opinions or the opinions of the people's leaders or own teachers. And that's what's challenging. If you ask, if someone's Jewish, what is a Jew? And that's not a philosophical question. That's a literal spiritual, like, striving question. What is a Jew? The letter J is inexistent in the Hebrew alphabet. What is a Jew? Is it a child of Yehuda? Does that include the Kohanim? And additionally, now some people have traditional answers for those questions, and additionally, but even then, it's subject to discussion. And oftentimes people don't want the actual answer, because that's a sit-down question. Let's talk about it. They want a political response. They want a military response. Are you signed up to our politics? Are you signed up? And part of the intentionality with those questions is to get people to obligated. So he said it. He promised. That means he has to do this, this, and this. And if he doesn't, then we're going to do that, that, and that. So the question, are you Muslim? Is not everything Islam. Is not everything Muslim. Is that not what the Quran teaches? And again, that sounds like smart aleck. It sounds like evasive. Do you know who you're talking with when answering this question? Are you looking for a sheep who just goes bah, yeah, bah, no? Are you looking for somebody who's like seriously striving and seriously question things on a daily basis? So when we get addressed by people who are just like rank and file sheep, that this is all not the point of what I'm sharing at the moment. So, anyways, we get that question: what am I? Blah, blah, blah. And there's the quiet um, criticisms and stigmatizations and accusations of being inauthentic, of being fake, of being disgenuine, of fronting, of doing all different types of things, deception, and otherwise. Um, and it's understandable. And we understand why people might perceive that and otherwise. However, we are genuinely striving to be who we are and being true, not just to who we are, but true to God and true to what God teaches us through all the prophets as best as we can. So that involves, well, I'll get to the point where I'm sharing here. It's been a while. It's been a while since I do this. Like maybe a week, maybe around there. At least right here. I was out and about this past week. How about that? Anyways, continuing on back on track. This is what I'm talking about. In my personal spiritual path, I am raised in a societal background that is very secular and very distrusting towards organized religion categorically. There is, at the same time, a strong societal norm and presumption of Judeo-Christianity. Christmas, New Year's, and those things. That's how I am raised. However, at the same time, I am raised in an environment that is mixed heritage, that knows what it is to be a foreigner, that knows what it is and how important it is to have empathy to those who are different from us, to listen to what people share rather than just presume and make conclusions. That's the foundation of how we grow up. That's the fabric of how I am raised. To be respectful and to be honest. To be considerate. The golden rule. So, I grew up across the street from a synagogue, watching people go to Shabbat every week. So, that's my beginnings, and that continues all the way through university. I love God throughout my life. I believe in God all my life. It's a religion that I have challenges with because I observed this is not about myself. I'll just get through this. I observe the hypocrisy within religious leaders, particularly in the United States. Knowing what's going on in the United States since a youngster, the injustices, the discrimination, the genocide, the racism, the classism, and the religious leaders being enveloped in it. And the further stable and credible religious leaders look, the further corrupt the religious leaders are. Because in order to look stable and credible according to the societal norms, that means having nice clothes, that means having a nice car, that means living in a nice neighborhood, speaking with a nice language even, having that nice education, and maybe some nice credentials to go along with that. And also, again, obviously the nice connections and everything else within society. All of those things are corruptions. All those things, basically all those are things that are corruptions to the religious teachings. And so there's a hypocrisy, because at the very least the religious leaders are turning a blind eye to what the the contributors are doing and otherwise. So, anyways, just saw that, and then a lot of judgmentalism. It's one thing to preach something and not to practice it and to turn a blind eye, but then it's a whole nother thing to like categorically say, and those people over there, oh, those are the worst of the worst. It's like, yeah, nah, I'm not buying into that. So that's all the way through. Now that being said, didn't to be honest, it was difficult to go to church. My mother joins a church during my high school years, and at that point, anyways, this is all side note. It was difficult to attend services, and again, love God and love a lot of the elements of it, but again, we just there's just there's an experience of a lacking of genuineness. So I'm just gonna keep it at that. Going to university, HBCU, there's a chapel. It's interdenominational. The reverend there is a beautiful brethren, beautiful uncle. Actually, I take his class in logic. I want to say it was. Yeah, logic. Um, and beautiful brethren, beautiful uncle. And to the point, I actually start attending services because I appreciate. Actually, that's the first time I prayed to God my freshman year, and after praying, I appreciate going to services. It was an interdenominational service, so it wasn't so like it wasn't so specific in terms of preaching a certain agenda. In addition, there was, I think, if I recall correctly, there was less of the that fervor of um, missionaryism of like going out to convert, because that tends to be further based within a denominational kind of foundation and intentionality. So in an interdenominational, it seems as though there's less of that call for people to go out and convert and all that type of like organizing along those lines. So perhaps now that's my general recollection. That was over 20 years ago. What am I talking about? That was 30 years ago. What am I talking about? So it was a while ago. But I felt comfortable going to that church because the message and the elements of the service were less like on oneself. And So that was like the first time I started attending services. And that was just undergrad, and I wasn't intending to join or whatever else. That wasn't even a thing because I don't even know that the church even had members, because it was just like the chapel. So, anyways, by that I'm just talking about the international interdenominational joint, rather than actually. I don't even know if there was baptisms or anything else like that. So it was different kind of. It's interesting to think about. I think it's different today, but I don't know. Anyways, that was pretty much my religious experience after graduating from undergrad. Just continued on. The whole time I did that, it wasn't even a big like. I didn't think of it as a big thing. Wow, I'm getting a little bit detailed into this joint, but it is getting to a point, and I guess it does serve a purpose to where I'm going with this, God willing. So even when I was attending services during undergrad, particularly my senior year, even somewhat before that as well, my junior year, particularly after joining a fraternity, particularly when I was living on campus too, I was living right across the street from the chapel. How about that? So after graduating from university, there was a different environment. My point is, like, even during that time, it wasn't that a big of a deal. I didn't have a thought about like joining a church or converting or going to baptism or anything else like that. It was just a matter of like, I appreciate going to these services. It's a positive message. I appreciate like being around people who are positive. And get some lunch or breakfast beforehand or afterwards, and that's fantastic. And so it was a beautiful experience, but it still fit very much within the secular norm that I was accustomed to all that time beforehand. So it was just a matter of like, I go to services too. So, okay, cool. That's it. Now at the same time, senior year, I went to the Million Man March. Because even at that stage, the first book that I read from front to back, adult book that I read from front to back, was the autobiography of Malcolm X. And I'm planning to get to that in a minute as well. So even even at that age, like open to different spiritual guidance and teachings, because just looking for truth, that's it, plain and simple, looking for truth. And when it's deficient in any particular community, in any particular leadership, we got to look someplace else to find that truth. And that's just facts. And that's not on us. And essentially, it's always on us at the end of the day. But for anybody who wants to like criticize the path or whatever, you need to look at yourself and recognize how within your own community there's falsehood, and that falsehood is the biggest deterrent from gaining participants, converts, or whatever else. Um, Pointing fingers at any other community and showing how they do it even worse, that's not doing it. That's not showing people truth. The lesser of two evils is not truth. How about that? We're getting a lot of different type of activity today. Usually when it's kinfolk who are just drinking or just intoxicated or whatever, it's just like it's in a particular location. It's off in the cut, and it's not being too like out there. When it's static, it doesn't tend to last that long. It's like here and there, and then like dissipates. Right now we're getting like a lot of like static kind of voices. By that I mean like it's not just ongoing. It's like here and there. So anyway, I'm just trying to read what the situations are, because these are the conditions. And already, the block may not be as hot as it was a couple weeks ago, but still, it ain't cool. Put it that way. So just be mindful, particularly because I am on blast. Where I'm sitting right now, this is a hot seat. And even though it's dark or whatever, people can see the blue light and know what I'm doing or whatever else. So it is what it is. And it is received by somebody, someplace, somewhere, somehow. Whatever. So, all right. Autobiography of Malcolm X, talking about truth, religious communities having falsehood that deters and discourages people from buying into the allegiance and the exclusivity within a religious community. And this is across the board. And obviously, there's always going to be some kind of element of duplicity or whatever else in any kind of community, any type of life experience. But what we find is that instead of addressing that or whatever in a proficient way, people kind of like try to either avoid it, deny it, or point fingers elsewhere, like, well, they don't do it and they don't do it and they don't do it. So or then just double down on accusing the person they're trying to convert and bring them in and saying, well, what about you, and da 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 da. So it's like, we're just looking for truth, that's all. So I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, just don't have much of a like direct relationship with Muslims at that moment, in terms of actually I know, and there are Muslims who I know and who are dear, close, actually friends and further. But in terms of like going to masjid and knowing the culture, and additionally not averse to it at that point, but just less knowledgeable about it, unless it's further distant. And there's also, again, there's a very strong influence or discouragement of people being religious at all within the United States. That's just the actuality. And seemingly it's even further in Europe. That's what we're told, atheism, whatever. But it's just that there's just a very strong discouragement for people to be religious. And then in addition to that, compounded, religious communities obviously have certain discouragements and stigmatizations and whatever else about people participating in any other type of religious thing. So if it's not immediately available, if it's not immediately present in somebody's life, it's difficult for somebody to take initiative of even finding out what it is or whatever, accordingly. So that's how I grow up. That's how I'm raised all the way through young adulthood. And this is my student days again. We're very institutionalized. Much of what we experience is through what our parents show us. I mean, we could talk about the streets experience or whatever for those who are exposed to that experience. But for most kinfolk who grow up like in a sheltered, like educational environment, it's family and it's school. And if people are already involved in a religious community, there's that. If people are involved in social groups, then there's that. But generally speaking, it's school and it's family. There it is. And in my experience, that's the religiosity that is experienced. So all the way through the latter stages of my formal education and institutional affiliation, or I should say participation, voluntary participation, perhaps. Anyways, when I graduated undergrad, just didn't have the same experience of living on campus right across the street from a chapel that's interdenominational and comfortable with a charismatic leader and otherwise. So, um, business school, I'm making moves. Study overseas, and additionally, and so I'm just in doing. I'm experiencing that. Meeting, and the whole time, meeting people from many different backgrounds, from all around the world, all different type of cultures and religions. So, and in that time, listening, learning, observing the truth, learning the truth, the ethics, the redeeming qualities from people all around the world. That's my church. That's my religious community during that process, during that period. So and in doing that, I'm seeing, okay, yeah, there is truth here. Like somebody comes from China, they're a decent person. They get that from someplace, and then they share some of what that is, some teaching. So this is what we taught. This is something that we're taught when we're young. Wow, that's awesome. From India, same thing. From Brazil, same thing. From Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, like there's truth where people come from. So as one who's looking for truth, we just put that in the data banks and be like, okay, there it is. All right, we are going someplace with this. It may take a minute. Anyway, so wow, this is the thought was this joint was actually supposed conceivably just a few minutes, but obviously there's further things that get unpacked or whatever in this process. So um, finishing up this scenario of just my spiritual summary of my spiritual path, or the conditions preceding my spiritual path. Yeah, it's a field of vibration. It's pain. Um, anyway, and I don't mean to be judgmental. I'm testifying, feeling the vibrations, pain. I don't know. I can't speak about what people experience when they feel my voice speaking. Um, but that's just with the vibration. So, um, and I can't say if people say they feel bad vibration when I speak, I can't say that I won't say, well, that's your fault. You shouldn't be doing that and this, that, and the other. Then it wouldn't be such a negative vibration for you. And there's certain legitimacy within that, and then I have to apply that to myself at this moment. That being said, just the phonetics about what's wrong. Loud at night, that's generally not a positive kind of thing. So, um, it's not just me. Anyways, so I say. Continuing on, wrestling. Graduate from da 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 da, and business school, law school. So law school, again, further meeting kinfolk from all around the world, further confirmation of truth being, and that's when I began my spiritual path, recognizing that secularism isn't enough. The secular realm, all the carrots and the sticks are not enough to answer the questions and experience the truth. And that's when I began my spiritual path. So, and I guess I'm supposed to do the very, very quick summary of that. So first, I do with what's first familiar, which is I am baptized and joined a church, very briefly, and under tenuous conditions, whatever. But it's all me, and there it is. Um, and that's from that point. I mean, that was in the Potomac area. I leave the Potomac area for. Um, I completed school. The work that I build during that time um, is unsupported sufficiently, so I come back here to like regroup and figure out what to do. And at the same time, going through nasty business, and that's when my spiritual path like truly begins. That's when the affliction, like serious, starts and further. Um, and by that point, I know enough about like the religions, what the Holy Scriptures are, and to start studying directly as much as possible. Later, after a number of years and kind of getting further situated in my spiritual path, but still, um, to be honest, I was at that time, after about 4 years, 4 or 5 years in my spiritual path, still not messing too tough at all with anybody on this continent, um, anybody in the United States, literally. But and at the same time being guided to be further uh, in community, in spiritual community, and trying to find like what spiritual community to join that's most conducive and most supportive of the spiritual path that I'm walking, and honoring the truth that I recognize. And so, um, for all different types of reasons, um, the fact that being a son of Yosef Avinu, that's one. Growing up across the street, I joined the shul that I grew up across the street from. Essentially, it moved, but that's the shul that I joined. But particularly Judaism, one of the big reasons, well, aside from what I just communicate, um, and recognizing truth within each tradition, um, one of the big reasons is that Judaism does not actively proselytize and try to convert other people. That's huge within our path. Not telling other people that they're wrong and that they have to be like us or whatever else. That's what enables me. I could join any. I don't want to say like it's like a like I can I can join any community I want. It's not a matter of like not trying to sound like being in demand or whatever else, but like that we see truth in each community, and so there's amenability to being within each community. Um, the challenge is being held accountable or held obliged to telling other people what to do. So that's 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 a significant reason why I left the church 20 years ago after being baptized, because when I started seeing the activity concerning missionary work, and that being further proactive and pronounced in the services and further, that was a signal amidst the additional conditions that I described of leaving. So anyways, that's one of the primary reasons of enabling me to join the shul compared to other traditions. And again, there's truth, the Torah, and further. When I'm asked when I join the shul why I'm doing Judaism, this is after I'm trying to remember the specific. I didn't have a preset answer to that because I tried to answer it genuinely, and I'm trying to remember the wording. But essentially, it was something to the effect of like, "This is where I learn about God, the Torah, and that's truth." And I'm not trying to hide. I'm not trying to like be smooth. I'm just answering the question genuinely. I'm being mindful that people probably don't want to hear everything about me, hear what I actually believe, and additionally, but want to hear enough about what my motivation or what my guidance is specifically in that context for that purpose. And so that's what I share. When people do have an interest, I share further. And there are many people, kinfolk, dear kinfolk, that I talk further at length about beliefs and tradition. And I'm even at the shul, in the synagogue that I joined a number of years ago, I make it very plain what my beliefs are, and what my activity is, what I do. It's well known. It's one of the reasons why I joined that shul specifically, because it supports interfaith work. It's involved in interfaith work, and that's my thing. And I make no apologies or hiding about it. That's what I'm about. So, and the actuality, the reason why I'm inactive from the show at this point, um, the basic reason is because it's a long ways away from where I live at this moment, and it requires having a car, and I give away my car, and when I do that, And part of the reason for me giving away my car is spiritual, it's economic and otherwise. But it's recognizing that that's not the solution for the concerns of the world today. And the solution exists in not having a car and not utilizing personal transportation. And so, when it comes time for me to make that kind of decision, the car works fine. I give it to somebody else. It's paid off. There's no note on it. Um, so it works fine. There's no maintenance issues or whatever. It wasn't a finance thing, but just gave it away. But when I gave it away, basically that was my ability to attend the shul, the services. Now at the same time, I was becoming further observant and further mindful of like being further observant, which means not driving during Shabbat and otherwise. So that's basically it. But also what I recognize is there being certain limitations, and this was no fault on the shul itself, but just certain limitations about what the shul can do. It's an amazing shul that has a lot of services and a lot of abilities, doing a lot of different things. But at the same time, when I become further involved and like being further solicited to like be further of a leader role in the thing, I could see a lot of the challenges and the needs within the shul. Um, and there are things that I can provide to help in satisfying those needs, but at the same time, I'm also aware that a lot of those solutions that I would share and that I can share would involve like significantly changing um, the characteristics of the lifestyle or the socioeconomic kind of like whatever. I'm getting a little bit off track, but so all that being said, I just stopped going to attending services, and it wasn't anything specific. And it wasn't any kind of animosity or otherwise. It was just a recognition of like this is where like my path is progressing at this point. And I didn't have a lot of conversations with kinfolk when I do that. I told people like don't have a vehicle, and people make an effort of driving around, but it's a long day. So, anyways, getting a little bit detailed in this sequence description. However, there's that. Um, and I guess I'll put this. This is relevant. I don't think I've ever like talk about this too tough, like in this type of sequence of describing my spiritual path. But it's shortly thereafter, to be honest, that I make shahada. Now this wasn't a foreign thing. It wasn't a matter of like switching teams or anything else like that. It's all in congruence with this path that I am on, that I practice. And the actuality is that I make shahada essentially years before that, and when offering salah, and additionally. So, and even then, a few years later, kinfolk may criticize or scrutinize the the conditions of me making shahada over 12 years ago. So, um, at the same time, again, like I said, that's another conversation. However, it is what it is. Um, so, again, that path, what I just described, I should also provide that during the time that that I joined the shul, this is that I began that about 17 years ago. Wow, that's a long time ago. At that same time, I started attending, as I've described before, events and gatherings in the Baha'i community. Tough, strong, even perhaps further frequently than going to shul. With study groups and interfaith devotionals and firesides and additional gatherings, feasts, and additionally, each month I was probably going to just as many Baha'i gatherings or thereabouts as I would the shul, because the shul is once a week at least, and then there would be like special occasions here and there. Um, Anyways, but I just throw that into the mix in terms of the formal communities of me joining. When it comes to like joining the Hindu community here, I go to the synagogue, I go to the temple, um, but it's a different type of thing. First of all, the process for joining a Eastern tradition, whether it's Depends on the lineage within Buddhism, but Hindu, Jain, have different like mechanics in terms of being involved in the community, and it just is different protocols than otherwise. My knowledge about Sikhi is comparatively modest, so anyways, uh, that's part of like my experience in terms of affiliation and involvement with spiritual communities in a formal way. And very easily people can say, "Oh yeah, wishy-washy," jumps from one place to the other, no kind of loyalty, no kind of like integrity, um, like just does the honeymoon stages, and then when getting bored or when it gets tough or when starting to get some responsibility, then shirks that and then just moves on to something else. It's very understandable, that type of criticism. What I can provide is that this is a extremely involved and tedious trod, plain and simple. And now we talk about Rastafari, and it's always Rastafari, it's always Judaism, it's always Islam, it's always Christianity, it's always Baha'i, it's always all of it. It's truth. It's not picking and choosing. It's trotting. So, and this is now we'll get into it. So I've shared some of like my personal kind of like details again, as I've done before, to set up after an hour what I'm actually supposed to be like sharing. I have not said a blessing, so I'm not going to partake of essence elements at the moment. So there is an absolute congruence in what I describe. For myself, like I said, it's simply looking for truth. And looking for truth and looking to settle within truth. Settle in a truthful way. With truthful people in a truthful community. Plain and simple. And life has falsity. That's the nature of it. And we have to be patient. We have to be honest about that. We have to be honest about the falsities within ourselves. Recognize that contradiction is intrinsic within life, and the difference between a contradiction and hypocrisy is that contradiction is just something that contradicts itself, something that works in a way that is opposite to what it proclaims. That's contradiction. Hypocrisy is the denial of the contradiction. Hypocrisy is the entrenchment within the illusion, the facade, the corruption that denies the contradiction. So, and we can all be accused of having hypocrisies one way or the other. It's very difficult not to have that either. All that being said, when searching for community and being with others, it can be a challenging thing to find a satisfactory balance or satisfactory conditions of commensurate truthfulness, of compatible truthfulness, compatible deception, or compatible contradictions and hypocrisy. So as I mentioned, for myself personally, this path that we are on is one that searches for truth and that honors truth wherever we find it. And in each of the traditions that I describe, in each of the communities that I describe, being formally involved with, I stay true to each one. I stay true to the promises to each one. Now, in the version or in the belonging to the Christianity, in that process of baptism at that moment. And again, I have to give a caveat to that statement that I just made about keeping my promises. In that night when I was called to baptize, last minute pressure on, and that's no excuse, but I'm just that it is conditions. I'm also solicited to. I was given a note saying, "Oh yeah, here you have to do this. This is part of the baptism. Don't tell it to anybody. This is yours, um, and you have to like do what it says on this sheet of paper." And I'm like, wow, nobody told me about this beforehand. What's going on? This, that, and the other. And I communicated concerns and whatever, but hey, I did it. I'm a man at that time, so I got to take responsibility for it. So, point is, I broke that promise. I broke what it said on that paper. I think it was one thing. I think it was one thing that said, I'm trying to remember if there's anything else, but I do know that the one thing that I do remember that I actually broke, actually, it said, it called for me not to do a certain thing. And at that moment, I said, okay, not a big deal. Don't have much of an interest in doing it anyway, so okay, fine. And it just seemed rather odd to me because, like, where does this come from? Like, I don't remember seeing this. I had yet to read the Gospels at that point, but I don't remember this being like one of the rules of Christianity. Where's this coming from? And I mean, do they know about me? Like, do they know like that I've had this problem in the past or whatever else like this? Like, I haven't said anything about this. Where's this coming from? But it wasn't a big deal. I'm like, okay, fine. Um, there's that. Um, and then, like, soon thereafter, like weeks after, I violate that promise. Because, well, not even a reason. I did it. I violated the promise. So that's one promise but that was still when I was still a member of the church. And it's not why I, it's not why I left per se, perhaps, in terms of my awareness. So aside from that particular instance, I after I leave the church, I read the entirety of the Bible. I read the Gospels. I continue to read and study the Gospels. I continue to abide by the teachings that Jesus shares. And obviously, there are a lot of different types of interpretations of like what that lifestyle actually is or whatever. And we hold our own with anyone. It's not a matter of holding our own, but like we stay true to that. So that in that sense, I do stay true and continue to uphold the promises that I make in my involvement with the Christian church. There's a Baptist church, to be specific, the denomination. In terms of Judaism, there's little like option otherwise. Like this is life, like and it's known that process. It's a formal process. It's over a year long of study. Everything is like shown beforehand, like what's involved beforehand. So there's no excuses and there's no surprises or otherwise. And so the obligations are ancient. It's spoken in the Torah what the 613 mitzvot are. The primary, like the ones that are like further like priority, particularly in this age, are taught, and so I continue to do that. I am further observant today than I am when I'm a member of the shul. So in that respect, I continue to make the. Now, in terms of politics, about supporting the nation of Israel, supporting the IDF, or otherwise, that's another question. One, support the nation of Israel. Do not support the IDF per se. Do not support it. Don't support the bombs. Don't subscribe to the politics. Don't support democracy. Don't have to do that. That's not part of the Torah. So, and that could be called, I could be called a traitor or whatever, because of that, because I don't toe the line, or we don't toe the line in that respect. That's people's prerogatives, but that's also people's own falsities as well. Um, so, not trying to get into that conversation, or whatever, but point is, I continue to uphold the promises that I make. And it's communicated during that time, like, yeah, there's no taking this back. Like, this is life. And so I stay true to that. Now, in terms of Shahada, does that contravene? It's all one God. So there's congruence in that. Whether proclaiming the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a prophet, Torah has less to say about that, because not proclaiming Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam as a deity, and not proclaiming that which abrogates the mitzvot of Torah. Now, within Islam, amongst Islamic scholars, we can talk about what the veracity of that statement about how much the Quran um, requires abrogation of mitzvot or otherwise. Um, but at that point, that's still a conversation. Um, and I continue to hold the promise that I make in each of these proclamations. Um, so those are perhaps the what may be perceived as formal allegiances, formal belongings, or otherwise, in one respect or another. Um, again, Hindu, Jain, um, we are these, and Taoist, we are this. Baha'i, don't know when the cards were instituted as the formal process, but have yet to turn in a card. One of the reasons is because Baha'i actively proselytizes, and that is a challenge within our walk. But if you talk to Baha'is, you might find Baha'is communicating our trad as very congruent and even synonymous with the teachings of Baha'u'llah and the Bab and Abdul Baha and Shoghi Effendi and otherwise. Anyways, still getting to the point. Okay. All right. I was talking about me staying true to my promises. All right. So I can be accused of wishy-washy. That's understandable. We can be accused of wishy-washy. That's understandable. But it's also most uninformed and perhaps less honest or somewhat further contrived and agendized such criticisms are, so such scrutinies and accusations are. So, again, we're simply looking for truth. This is an important thing to share, and maybe that's one of the reasons why it's taking an hour to share it, for better and for worse, to work up to it, but then also like to provide some type of like wall that makes it further difficult to receive. It is an important thing, if I say so myself. So we're getting to it, God willing. So I share some of my personal path, some of the alignments, some of the allegiances or affiliations, and otherwise, some of the promises, and the coinciding susceptibility of accusations. It's all in a path for truth. We are looking for truth, and we are looking to settle within truth, to congregate within truth. When we make initial investigations, we look, we study, we learn, we share what we can in response, and then we make decisions about feasibility. When the untruth within any religiosity that exists within each religiosity becomes untenable, there is the natural, inevitable progression of continuing to search for truth. elsewhere. And in that process, it's not denying the truth that continues to exist within the religious community. And it's not abrogating or forsaking the truth that exists within the religious community. It's simply looking for a further, fuller experience of truth. Somewhere, somehow else. And that's one important thing to recognize in what I just described as well. That when making a decision or when progressing from affiliation and congregation of one within one community and then continuing on either to another community or just in the wilderness or wherever, it's not a matter of forsaking any preceding community affiliation, not condemning. And that's one thing we observe. We don't do that. We don't condemn any community, and we don't subscribe to requirements for doing that, because we do observe that tends to be a situation in certain situations. So here we go with what I'm supposed to be sharing. Nearly an hour and a half into this joint. This is what I'm sharing. What is shared with me during the prayer and studies today is that this is my path. This is my personal path. And there's legitimacy within it. It's in this trod that continues through this moment, at this moment, within Rastafari, simultaneously with all the other religious teachings, because that's part of the nature of Rastafari, is studying, honoring truth. Now, Rastafari is specifically Afrocentric and continually Afrocentric, but at the same time, Rastafari also champions truth and wisdom. And we reason. We can have differences of perspective and opinion, even practice, amongst the three mansions and the further temples and otherwise. So there's differentiation. Part of Rastafari is that it is a mysticism. It is a spirituality. It's not a religiosity. There is religiosity within Rastafari. There is organized. There are doctrines within Rastafari, components for them that find that benefit. But it's not a requirement to be Rastafari. And so and Rastafari does not try to go out and convert and proselytize. It shares, we share, I share. But the point is, other than to conquer and convert others, it is a spiritual awakening responding to affliction and downpression that is universally identifiable, that is spoken of within each of the traditions, that precipitates each of the traditions. So there's very much a congruence between what we share. And again, when I talk about always Rastafari, when I begin my spiritual path, I talk about being in law school. It's very difficult to say exactly when my spiritual path begins. I could talk about the first time I prayed in that chapel in undergrad, my freshman year undergrad. I can talk about the time traveling to Southern Africa and Zimbabwe and talking directly for the first time with Rastafari brethren and being introduced to the faith at that moment. And again, at that moment, I am deep in Babylon. at that moment. Law school, elite law school in the nation's capital. So there are seeds that are sown at that moment that take time to reach fruition. And even then, in the spiritual path, it takes that was 20 years ago, over 20 years ago, 24 years ago, 25 years ago, actually, to be honest, to be specific, 25 years ago. That conversation is had with the brethren in Zimbabwe. The Farai, George, and William. Peace and blessings. And it takes about 20 years before arriving at that proclamation of Rastafari. There's always that identification. There's always that congruent pathway. That parallel pathway, perhaps, is one way of describing it, through the years of my personal spiritual path, without specifically proclaiming Rastafari, but being thoroughly Rastafari. Again, it's similar with what I described in terms of the masjid. When I'm in undergrad in the Muslim community, just there's fewer occasions of interacting with kinfolk. The Caesar planet, in that one occasion many years ago. But in terms of ongoing availability of like reasoning and going into the bush and attending a Nyabingi, less available, and less even like literate about like being able, even in being a spiritual diplomat and being knowledgeable about different traditions of the world. There's less interaction even in those realms with Rastafari. So it takes a while, and there it is. But at the same time, when emerging within Rastafari, there's a recognition that this is what it is from the beginning, and that it exists. My walk, my trial within Rastafari exists before I'm born. And again, we're talking about when we recognize the black intelligentsia within the United States being akin within Rastafari. The relationship, the immediacy, the proximity of jazz and the djembe, the strivings of John Coltrane and Love Supreme with Burning Spear. It's the same path. They're different languages, they're different nuances, and additionally, but it's the same thing. And it's distinct from the gospel. It's distinct from Islam. Is distinct from a number of those things. It's distinctly Afrocentric. It's distinctly, we can say, somewhat rebellious or militant concerning the assimilation and enslavement within the system. And still, like, it's like brethren separated at birth and learning to find each other again, be connected. That's what the jazz and djembe are. And I grew up in the culture of jazz. And so if and when kinfolk are able to recognize jazz as part of Rastafari, that's a wee bit of a step. Or at least recognize an element of jazz existing within Rastafari. Then my trod within Rastafari becomes easier to recognize. This is such a convoluted way of articulating this, but we're gonna keep on going because we still have yet to get to it. We're there. We're getting there, but we have yet to get to it. We're getting there, but yet to get to it. I had to be. We got things to do now. Yeah, too. Still at night. All right. That's basically where we're getting to with this is this. Our spiritual path, my spiritual path, our spiritual path exists before we do, before we are born. And the search for truth that I am on, the search for truth that we are on, exists before we are born. There are people, our forebears, our parents, our ancestors, our relatives, our elders, who are searching for truth before we are born. Particularly in the experience of the Middle Passage, kinfolk who come from the Middle Passage, the experience of enslavement, where language and religion, music are tortured and taken away. Relationship with God, relationship with ancestors, relationship with relatives is tortured and taken away. It is a blank screen in many ways. Forgetfulness. And instead, what is infused, what is taught, what is forced upon is an identity of enslavement and rewards of enslavement. Work in the field and make master happy. Excel at sports and make master happy. Excel at music, make master happy. Excel in entertainment and make master happy. Excel maybe in these few other endeavors and make master happy. That is the experience of the slave. A forgetfulness of relationship with God within, a relationship with ancestors, and a relationship with relatives, a relationship even with nature. And that is where the spiritual path of the slave begins, to search for truth, to search for God. We can say God and truth are the same. And to search to find truth, to search, to settle within truth, to settle with others who share truth. That is the path of the slave spiritually awakening. And that begins many generations ago, even many centuries ago. And that is the path that we continue within, that search for truth. Now, for people of African ancestry, for people coming from the Middle Passage, that blank slate, so to speak, effectively, is inundated with Judeo-Christianity. And so, there's an observance of truth within Judeo-Christianity. Okay, love God with all one's heart, with all one's soul, with all one's might, with all one's spirit, with all one's strength, and to love our neighbor as ourselves. Okay, we see truth with that. Forgiveness, okay, truth. Healing, okay, truth. Sharing, okay, truth. We see that. We have to honor that. We have to recognize that. We're loyal to that truth. But then we see the hypocrisy. Masters aren't living that way. The clergy is not living that way. Society is not living that way. The government leaders are not living that way. And when solicited to join congregation, as lesser thans, even as equal tos, whilst turning a blind eye to that hypocrisy. For some of us, it's hey, it's fine. It's acceptable. For many of us, it's not acceptable, and we have to continue searching. And this is generations before I am born. This is where we come from. So, where else do we go? We find Islam. Honorable Elijah Muhammad, the brethren who teaches him, whose name escapes me at the moment, over 100 years ago. Okay, Quran, okay. Oppression is worse than death. Come on now. Marry women and do right by women. All right, let's hear it. Pray daily and speak with God. Yes. Tell me further. Acknowledge the one God. Provide charity. Fast. Wow, yes. I'm remembering now. Perform pilgrimage. Yes, they're holy places where God speaks with our ancestors, with us. So we see truth in the Quran, we see truth in Islam. But then we also see falsity as well. Oppression is worse than death. Oppression is worse than slaughter. But enslavement is still permissible. All our brethren but the Arabic tongue is the one that is perspicuous, according to the English translations. So again, we see truth. We have to honor truth. We recognize that truth. We're loyal to the truth. Yes. But at the same time, we have to continue to search. And so we continue in that path. And again, this is generations before I am born. We continue in that search. We look within Hinduism in the past century, particularly. We look within Buddhism within the past century, particularly. We look within Baha'i faith in the past century, particularly. We look within Judaism within the past century, particularly. We look within additional traditions. East Asia, Kongzi, Laozi, Mingzi, Zen, Tibet, and further, Sikhi, and further. And within all these traditions, with all these communities, many of us find our homes. And that's fine. We have to find where we're comfortable with it respectively. It's not a personal, individual ego thing. We have pragmatics in life. Marriage, family, children, work, politics, condition, economics, And further, we have to make practical decisions in this earthly decisions the best we can with the information that we have at the moment. And that's no excuse, and that's no better than or less than. But we each find our solutions accordingly. So some of us settle within each community, and God be with each one. Many of us continue to search. And in that search, many of us find Rastafari. For the past century. Obviously, one of the prominent characteristics or qualities of Rastafari that attracts people of African ancestry, particularly from the Middle Passage, is an explicit Afrocentricity that is affirmational of the roots and the spirit of our ancestors who are tortured with that blank slate. There is an awakening that affirms the relationship with our ancestors and the relationship our ancestors have with the eternal, with the Most High Elohim. Jah, Allah, Brahman, Tao. So the point being is that the path we are on, amidst all the different interactions, amidst all the perceivable contradictions and abandonments and wishy-washiness, it's simply a search for truth, the best we can. And it's a search for truth that exists before we are each born, particularly at this moment in this generation, and even in recent generations. So it's not a personal want. It's beyond a personal want. It's beyond a personal decision. It's beyond a personal whim. And it's beyond the political boxes. It's beyond all the temporal ambitions and strategies and competitions that try to entrench these binaries and intersectionalities. All right, so that's much of it at this moment. And that's just some of what we got to say for this moment. Let's see if we can wrap this up at some point soon. Yeah, the wordplay is not funny. It's not cute. Let's continue on. So the summary at 1 hour and 44 minutes is that we are on a spiritual path. I am on a spiritual path. We are on a spiritual path to find truth and to settle down in truth, to settle down with truth, with people who are truthful, community that is truthful. We find truth within many different communities, within each community. We find difficulties within many communities as well, which require us, that guide us to continue search for truth elsewhere. And when we do, we continue to stay true to the relationships, to the promises to the teachings that we learn in this process. We abstain from forsaking communities. We abstain from proclaiming any as enemy or antagonist. We stay loyal to truth, we stay loyal to God, and we stay loyal to the generosity that is shared with us in the sharing of these teachings and this wisdom. This path that exists before we are born travels through a number of different traditions, specifically in the Western Hemisphere. From the Middle Passage, it travels through Judaism, it travels through Christianity, it travels through Islam, it travels through Baha'i, it travels through Eastern traditions, and it travels through Rastafari. We learn from each one, and we honor each one. We reason with each one. We share differences of opinion, perspective, translation, interpretation, belief with each one. And we are committed to build with each one in honest, righteous ways that are taught within each one. But that's the basic joint, to recognize it's a path. Our spiritual path exists before we are born. Wow, I cooked rice 2 hours ago. That was supposed to be eaten. Our path begins over 2 hours ago too. How about that? Now it's getting late. Our path begins before we are born. So when scrutinizing what we do and the perceived hypocrisies or whims or whimsicalness or whatever of what we do, it's beneficial for kinfolk to recognize that this is a solemn trod, honest trod for truth that exists beyond our wants, our egos, even our decisions. It exists beyond our existence, beyond our birth and beyond our death. And Rastafari provides that accommodation of understanding and support and relationship within the search. It is beneficial also to recognize that whilst I speak specifically of the experience of the Middle Passage and our ancestors who progressed through the Middle Passage, this experience of enslavement is a universal experience for all different types of peoples, regardless of what the ethnicity or religious background is. People who are super mega rich are enslaved to the expectations, the obligations, the fears, the isolations, the ignorances, the blank slates of forgetting, of forgetfulness, of being tortured, away from remembrance of God, remembrance of ancestors, remembrance of relatives. So this experience of spiritual path, this experience of spiritual awakening, exists beyond the specific experience of the Middle Passage as known by Africans on this continent. So this trod of searching for truth is shared by millions, hundreds of millions of kinfolk around the world today. find home within Rastafari. Many find home in places outside of Rastafari or distinct. From Rastafari. So there is that. Now, one community or one experience, one religiosity that I abstain from mentioning in that joint, not necessarily intentionally, but just perhaps by happenstance or by other reason, is Native community. And this kind of gets into the segue of something else we got to share for the moment, which is I'll just say this and see what else we're going to say, because we've been talking for a long time at this moment. We got things to do. It's serious, kind of, sort of. And also beneficial to get some sleep, because this is bedtime at this point. It's only 22 hours, 100 hours, however. It's still beneficial to like cultivate this regularity. So Native community, particularly coming from a mixed experience, what we observe is that the Native community is most genuinely supportive of our foreignness. All different types of communities communicate or share a tolerance for us being different, for our foreignness. And there are different degrees of how much our foreignness is accepted, is supported, is celebrated. Some of that support can be like, some of that support is continual, even when simply basically partial, meaning like only like somewhat so. It's continual, and it's like, okay, enough. There's enough support for like having the basic necessities, but without being proactive and very encouraging about being further learned, studious, enthusiastic about mixed heritageness, foreignness, because that's essentially what it is. It's a foreignness to any particular homogeneity. So some of our support that we receive from different communities is genuine, it's constant, it's continual, but at the same time, it's only to a certain extent. And that's natural. It's natural. Some of the support is actually very enthusiastic and very, very supportive, but often for a short period of time. Usually is when any particular community needs something, needs to know something, needs some protection from something, needs to like resolve something or otherwise. And so for that particular moment, oh, yo, come on. But then when that's completed, okay, yeah, nah, don't you got some place to go? So you have to be mindful of those ebbs and flows. And obviously there's always going to be hostilities and antagonisms. And some of it is duplicitous. Some of it is like pretends to be supportive. In actuality, it's just like, I can't stand these fools. So what we observe is that in our Native community, there are all those elements that I just described. But in general, what we observe, and we got to do a dot on this, because this is to this moment. And again, given my considerable amount of experience in my personal life, but obviously that's only a blip in the screen. But what we observe is that within a Native community, and this can be applied to Native community around the world, just the experience of being Native. There's an intrinsic, genuine welcomingness of foreignness compared to that with other communities. And it's not necessarily like a full acceptance. There's still a distrust. There's still like a differentiation. But generally speaking, there's a further like foundation of peace and calmness and a sense of like belonging within the Native community itself that enables the Native community to be further welcoming, genuinely welcoming, continually welcoming of people who are different, without the people who are different being perceived as an automatic threat per se. Now, that's being said amidst like the Native community here being in the midst of genocide at this moment for centuries. But at the same time, ironically enough, like all the other communities, ethnic, religious, and additionally, have this sense of being foreign on this particular land, at the very least, being foreign. And because being foreign, not having that foundation of peace and calmness to the same extent that Native people do, to be able to welcome somebody and accept somebody who's different, who's a foreigner. And again, the welcomings may be rather formidable for a period or to a partial extent, or amidst a certain amount of like duplicity. But in terms of just like being peaceful and be like, oh, okay, yo, what's going on? Yeah, no, we see you. No, you cool. Like we just feel a stronger, a stronger vibration in that respect amongst Native community. Now, as I'm saying this, I'm being reminded, like, wait a minute, just a few months ago, you said like the people that you vibe with the most are the Siki. How's that going to be? And you can talk about Native. You can run the tape back and try to call me out on inconsistency, and we can reason about it. I'm speaking from experience of truth as best I can, but there's very much congruence in what I'm articulating, as best I recall when I talk about the Siki community, and just speaking from the experience at the moment and through the years. So it is what it is. You can ask Biz. Anyways, that's what we experience. So given that, we factor into that notion of searching for truth and searching to settle within truth, and to settle within community of truth and those who share truth. So anyways, there's that. And now I'm going to share this joint, which is cultivated in the past day. It is written after Shabbat, so like to hear it. Here it go. The empire is an orphanage of wailing children and an arsenal of weapons. Let us be loving and patient parents with the newborn baby crying throughout the night. What do you remember about the garden? Trees, plants, fresh water, fresh air, bright daylight, comfortable shade, soft, firm ground, sex. What do you want to remember about the garden? Peace, relationship, purpose. Let us be birds, building our nests, petit à petit. Let us be squirrels, building our pantries, diligently on the daily. Let us be ants, organizing our security, humbly. Let us search and find the replenishing trees and plants that provide for us throughout the seasons. We are fruit trees. Let us consider how we share. Let us decide where we plant. All thanks and praise to the Most High Elohim, blessed love and peace in Rastafari. That might be where we conclude it for today. There are other things to say. However, in this way, we leave it. And say all thanks and praise to the Most High Elohim, blessed love and peace in Rastafari.